What's going on, guys? So I wanted to put out a quick video today. I just wrote this article here called "This Uranium Investment Could Be a Huge Opportunity for Early Investors," and I'm going to get into what that article talks about. If you want to read the article, I will put a link to it in the description of this video, along with a few other links. But what I basically want to get into is uranium and the market as a whole. So if you don't know much about uranium, uranium is the material used. You mine it out of the ground like you would gold or silver, and it comes in metal form, and you use this ore and you process it, and that's what you use to create nuclear energy. And what's going on today is there's still a huge, I guess there's a lot of ignorance surrounding uranium, right? And you think of nuclear energy and you think atomic bombs, and you think of radioactive waste, and you think of Fukushima, and there's all these disasters that happen, that have happened, that kind of spark a lot of distaste with a lot of people. And even if these events don't even happen that often, but there's just been so much propaganda surrounding nuclear bombs and nuclear energy that it's hard for us as a society to shift away from this negative mindset towards uranium. And the fact about uranium and nuclear energy in general is it's actually the cleanest, most efficient, and best energy form that we have. I was reading a article, and it's actually this article here. It's called "Recycling Nuclear Waste." So what a lot of people don't understand is that you've probably seen the Simpsons episode where Homer's working at his nuclear energy plant, and you see all these buckets of green liquid, and it's toxic waste, and you think of that and you're like, oh well, how are we going to deal with this toxic waste? If you spill any of it and it gets into our ecosystem, it's going to be bad. But the fact of the matter is, this nuclear waste actually comes in metal form. So when they're done with the uranium, it actually turns into a different form, and it can actually be reused over and over again. In fact, in this article, it says we could power the entire U.S. electricity grid off of the energy in nuclear waste for almost 100 years. And right now, what most people do, what most companies do with their waste, is they just store it away, and it doesn't decompose for 100,000 years because it's a metal. And what this guy's proposing in this article is that we reuse the uranium, and it turns into different compounds, and we just keep reusing it and keep pulling energy from it, and we actually get to a point where this stuff can decompose actually rather quickly in like 300 years, which is a very small amount compared to 100,000s. But the point is, the waste that comes off of these nuclear plants isn't actually harmful at all, and it can be reused for more energy, and we're kind of wasting our time, pulling oil out of the ground, trying to set up wind farms, trying to set up solar farms that create more that's bright. That create more waste than any other thing. And I mean, like, wind energy kills endangered species. Solar energy takes up a ton of space. And both of these are kind of inefficient ways to pull energy. I mean, they can be supplemental, but all the time we see wind energy being supplemented with natural gas, which isn't exactly the best thing to use. It's similar to using oil. But what I want to talk to you about is first URA, which is the ETF that I'm going to be using to get invested in this market. It's basically a basket of mining companies and different resource companies that are involved in uranium. And if we zoom back, I mean, this market is just in a complete depression. Ever since Fukushima happened, prices have just gone into a depression, and when prices go into a depression, the miners have less incentive to mine the material, and they're pulling less profits. And it's just this cycle that feeds into itself, and it just gets worse and worse and worse until more interest comes into the space and prices increase. Then miners can actually pull a profit. So we're just in this huge depression right now, and we're kind of seeing this bottom formation forming, which is what first got me interested in the uranium space, is kind of seeing the beginning of these miners turn around. And the way you see this is you basically draw out this wedge pattern, or wedge or triangle, whatever you want to call it, and we're seeing these prices, the price of these miners just slowly coil up, and they're ready to make a move to, you know, either direction, up or down. But the point is they're just so cheap, and things can't get much worse for the miners. They really need some increase in prices. And if we look at, let's see here, let's go to the commodity price. Right now uranium is at $28 a pound, and we're seeing this increase in price here, which is a good sign. We haven't seen a sustained increase in price like this with kind of a bottom forming, I mean, since since the commodity's been tracked. So it's a really good sign. I think the miners are going to start seeing some profits here, or at least less of a loss. And what I want to point out to you here is I found this article in 2016. It's never been a worse time for uranium miners. And that was back in 2016 when prices were better. Prices were higher. Prices were up in the mid-30s. So you can imagine how difficult time the miners are having right now. And I just think that there's more information in this article that I wrote. I don't want to make this video too lengthy, but the point I want to get across to you is, I like to be involved in markets when things start to turn around, and commodity markets are really tough, and dealing with miners are really tough. But if you can be involved with a market early on when things are starting to turn around, you can really, profit from that. Like, every market has its downturn, and some worse than others, but sometimes those market downturns are a little bit overextended, and it creates opportunities for people like you and me. I'm not Mr. Moneybags. I don't have a bunch of money to throw around, so I really try and be an assassin and a sniper with the money that I do have. I try to find really good opportunities for myself that I can take advantage of. And I really see that in this ETF here and some of the companies within the ETF. And maybe you can look at it yourself and see what you think about it. But I really think that, uranium is one of the most hated markets, maybe the most hated market. I mean, if you talk to anybody about uranium or nuclear energy, there's instantly, these common misconceptions that come up in conversation. And, that paired with a really beaten down price, paired with really wealthy individuals like Bill Gates creating nuclear energy companies that aren't even publicly listed, kind of under the radar, that makes me think that things might be turning around here. And over the next, it's definitely a long-term thing, but over the next 10 or 20 years, the market's going to do incredibly well, or at least kind of come out of this depression that it's been in. So I'm always looking for plays like this, not necessarily sure bets, but, plays with really good risk-reward ratios. So there's a lot of reward that can be had with this. There's some risk. I think worst case scenario, my investment just kind of, stays unchanged for a few years. That could be the worst case scenario, but I also think there's some potential for things to do well over this next year or so, with this move that we've had here and the move that we've seen in the commodity price. So, I'm going to put a link to the article that I wrote here. I'm going to put a link to my Twitter account and a few other things that you guys can check out if you want to stay involved with me on these updates. I'm trying to put out more content today. I've been kind of slacking the last few weeks, been a little bit introspective. Also put out a new podcast. You can find that on assetguild.com, and you can also find it at anchor.fm under Asset Guild. And that podcast is on coin flipping as a business and coin flipping as an investment strategy, if you want to check that out. If you ever want to check anything out of mine, you can go to assetguild.com or go to my Twitter account. So I'm going to be sharing those links with you in the description of this video. Thanks so much for stopping by, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this video. Thanks.